Simon, and we are here at Green Oil HQ with someone very special. Now, if you've ever done this, mountain biking, if you enjoy going out in the woods, if you enjoy riding downhill, doing dirt jumping, you actually have this man to thank. His name is Charlie Kelly. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm just wrapping up a one-month tour of United Kingdom. I've been here doing lectures and promoting my book here, which is basically the story as I saw it of how mountain biking came to be. And I don't make any claim to have invented the mountain bike itself. What I did invent was downhill racing against the clock, and after that the mountain bike more or less invented itself. But in 1979, my friend Gary Fisher and I rented a garage and started building bikes, and we called our company Mountain Bikes, and the sport actually takes its name from our company name.
Ah, interesting. And why the name mountain bikes? I know a lot of people, a lot of people ride bikes off-road, not necessarily on a mountain, and people then think, well, why are they called mountain bikes? But that was actually your brand.
That was our company name, and
so you're the one to blame for that.
we are, and the day that we decided that we were going to build bikes commercially, and thinking we might be able to sell 10 or 15 of these every year, we went to the bank and we said, we need a commercial account, and they said, what's the name of the company? And I don't remember which one of us said Mountain Bikes, but that was the name of our company. And clearly it's, like many other commercial names, has gone into the general lexicon.
That's interesting. And it was called repacking, wasn't it? And also you called the bikes originally actually clunkers.
Well, it's because they were originally 40-year-old pre-war Schwinn's that you could get for very little money, and they were pretty much bulletproof. And Gary and I were bicycle racers at the time. We had these expensive Italian racing bikes, but we got these old one-speeds just used for our town bikes, and one thing led to another. Where we live, we're surrounded by a lot of hills with are laced with a lot of dirt roads, and the first time I coasted down one of those dirt roads on $15 worth of junk, it was very addictive, and it turns out that other people have succumbed to the same addiction.
Yeah, I know I have, for sure. And tell us more about the book. I think a lot of people are really interested in the history of the sport. It gives a lot of happiness to a lot of people, and I know your book has explained some of the history behind it, and there's some great photographs in there as well.
Yes, well, I'm indebted to my friend Wendy Craig, who at a time when it was considered pretty unimportant and there might have been 15 or 20 people who did it, I considered it a goofy hobby, and I didn't think a lot of other people would take part, but this one woman came along on all our adventures, and she brought her Nikon camera and documented all that stuff, and my book is certainly indebted to her efforts of taking the photographs. No one else thought enough of what we were doing to even bother, but she did, and she has done very well with her collection of photographs.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just so people know, what is the name of the book? We'll get some good shots.
It's called Fat Tire Flyer, spelled in the American way. Fat Tire Flyer, Repack, and the Birth of Mountain Biking.
And it's a heavy book, and it's got some great photos, black and white and colour ones as well. Got to ask, the rumour is, people said, it started by hippies on a mountain somewhere in California. Did you all dress like hippies?
Well, I'm pretty much dressed like I did then, which is basically jeans and a t-shirt, and it wasn't considered a costume. It's what you put on in the morning, Really, when I got on my road bike, of course, I put on the jersey and the shorts and all that stuff. Not a helmet, because that didn't exist then. But when I went on my, we didn't even call them mountain bikes then. We called them clunkers because they were essentially junk. And so, you just went out there like you dressed for ordinary, everyday walking around.
It's still nice to ride like that. I sometimes just ride in jeans, actually, or army trousers, and it's a lot fresher and more relaxed sometimes. So your friend and housemate was the Gary Fisher, who owns the brand, of course, Gary Fisher.
Well,
what was he like to live with and ride with when?
For about 10 or 12 years, we were joined at the hip. He had some out-of-town gigs. He worked as a mechanic on stage race teams in Europe, and I was a rock band roadie, so I'd be out of town with the band sometimes. Ironically, you guys have never heard of the band that I work for, Sons of Champlin, because I am the only roadie in the world who's more famous than the band. Whenever we were both in town at the same time, we were pretty much joined at the hip. We shared the house for 4 or 5 years, and then we started our business and ran that for about 4 or 5 years before our business inaptitude really sunk the business. We didn't realize what we were onto, because when we first started, there was no thought that this would take over the world. We thought, well, there might be a few dozen people every year that would want to take part in this, but and the bikes that we sold were tremendously expensive because they're handmade, and my friend Gary and I were just, the frames would come to us from our frame builder Tom Richie, and Gary and I would Richie USA, yeah. Okay. Gary and I would build the wheels, and Gary would face the headsets and install the bottom brackets, and we basically, the two of us, we got employees later on, but the two of us, my best friend and I, were building the coolest bikes in the world, and eventually the world caught on to that, because a bike's a bike. You can't hide what it is, and essentially a couple of big manufacturers started putting out similar bikes, and you can do it a lot cheaper on an assembly line than one at a time in a rented garage, So when the price came down, the popularity soared.
Yeah, I see. So it's almost a good thing in a way that your idea was copied by the big manufacturers. It kind of got it to the masses.
Well,
I bet you guessed I bet you wish they gave you $100 for every bike they sold. But
I'd take 10 cents, but because that would still add up. But I was a bit resentful at first when basically our idea was, co-opted, if you will. But I've had some time to reflect, 35 years, and my thought is that almost no one gets to change the world even a little bit. And Gary Fisher and I certainly did change the world a whole bunch.
Yeah, you did. And what did you wish that you had then, which exists now? And what do you think is the best innovation in mountain biking? There must have been parts where you thought this was always breaking, the bearings are always stripping. What would be the thing that if you go back in time and have then, what would you have wanted?
There's no question, disc brakes, because until the disc brake came along, that was always the weakest system on the bike, and everybody was, they were. We started off with drum brakes because we were riding these old bikes, and that was what you could use. But then when Gary and I started manufacturing bikes, we used rim brakes, big cantilever brakes. But the brakes were always the weakest system on the bike until the disc brake came along. And I do appreciate the full suspension, 150 millimeters of travel on the bike that I ride right now, because when I get on a rigid bike and ride it off-road, I go, I can't believe I did this, because it's a pretty rough ride, and we lived with it for a long time, but we lived with a lot of pretty feeble braking systems also. So I no question in my mind that the disc brake has really the one thing I'd keep.
Yeah. I love my disc brakes.
Right.
I actually did have cable brakes on I had a Specialized P3 and did a downhill race in Pitlochry in Scotland, and I had cable V brakes, and my wrists were hurting a lot by the end of that, and obviously now I have hydraulic disc brakes, and it really helps, doesn't it?
Well, when we first started building these bikes, we did everything we could to improve the braking. We used brakes made for tandems, cantilever brakes made for tandems. We used motorcycle levers, these really enormous motorcycle levers, to get a little more leverage. And then we actually manufactured our own brake cables, much thicker than the ones you could buy in a bike shop, because we wanted to minimize how much they stretched when you use the brakes.
Yeah.
So we put a lot of thought into the brakes, but really had to work with what was on the market at the time.
Right. Yeah. The Repack story, so it's probably legendary now. A lot of you probably don't know this, but it was called the Repack Race.
Because the first time I went down it was with a coaster brake, which is just your kickback brake.
That's right, you might have been to the Netherlands, and all the bikes there, most of the bikes there just have a back pedal brake, so you pedal backwards, and that uses the drum of the rear hub to act as a brake.
Right, and the highest point in the Netherlands probably 10 meters above the lowest point.
Yeah.
And but we were coming down a hill that was 2 miles of 14% grade, and there's probably a physics formula that will tell you how much heat a 200-pound guy on a 50-pound bike generates in 1,300 feet of elevation difference. But I can tell you it's a lot. And that brake would be, you couldn't touch it. I mean, and the smoke would be pouring off of that brake, and the whatever lubricant was still in there would be dripping out. And the joke was, one trip down and you had to go take it home and tear it apart and repack it with grease.
Yeah.
So that, and really it was considered kind of a joke, but the joke really has stuck.
Yeah, I see. If only I was around back then, I could have sold you lots of eco grease for there.
I guess so.
I was gonna ask, what's like your craziest story? I know that you worked with George Lucas of Star Wars.
Well,
so you met lots of famous riders, and you were a roadie as well. So you must have lots of crazy stories, even a combination of all three.
Well, you want rock and roll stories, you want mountain bike stories, but the one time I met Janis Joplin, I was delivering my friend's drums over to her house, and when I knocked on the door, I didn't get an answer. I went and I called him and I said, what do I do? No one's home. And he said, well, actually they're home. They just never answer the door there. You just have to walk in. And I said, really? Okay. Well, I went back there and I just marched in Janis Joplin's front door, and Janis was in fact home, and she was in fact wearing red panties. And shoes. She had shoes on too. So, and the odd thing was the shoes matched the panties, and I'm wondering why they both, was that conscious or not, but anyway,
you were coming.
and my only conversation with Janis Joplin went along the lines of, well, I've got Dave's drums here, where would you like them? And she said, oh, put them in that room over there, and that was it, just doing business as usual with Janis Joplin.
She didn't think his drums were a euphemism then?
No, I had him with me, but and in fact, that guy still a friend of mine 50 some odd years later.
Yeah, nice. I know your legacy is important, and you've been collecting mountain bike literature up to 1992. So I guess after 1992, you had
you couldn't keep up with it anymore, right?
Exactly, yeah.
But and I'm glad you mentioned that, because my last great lifetime project is to scan and put online my incredible library of mountain bike history, because originally started collecting it because most of it mentioned me, but then I pretty much got everything. And I'm sure you're going to post a link for the Legacy project, but my project is to scan and put online this immense library of mountain bike history. And when I say mountain bike history, I have pretty much everything. I have press releases, I have spec sheets, I have race results, I have club newsletters, I have pretty much every magazine that was in print, and I also published the very first mountain bike magazine called, ironically, Fat Tire Flyer. Yeah. So, and in fact, my own magazine was really the only thing that mountain bikers could read about the sport until about 1986. So anyway, my collection fills a pretty large room, and the object is to scan it, put it online, and I do have a GoFundMe site that you can go and help me out with that, because it doesn't happen for free.
That's awesome. Did you ever meet Tim Manley?
I did meet Tim Manley. Actually, he did some pretty major articles about me, and he put Gary Fisher and me and my friend Joe Breeze on cover of Discovery Magazine, and also when he started MBUK, which was the slick version. It started off actually as a photocopied thing,
really?
with but I had articles in the first I think 3 or 4 issues of Mountain Biking UK. So I've known Tim Manley for I don't know, 35 years or so, 30 years anyway.
Yeah, well, he's a good guy. When I was a student, I wrote a letter to MBUK about the environment and mountain biking, and he emailed me personally and said, could you maybe write an article for us? And I wrote an article, but it was rubbish, and they didn't print it. So they made my letter of the month, and MBUK still owe me 6 Corona beers, actually. So,
really?
Yeah, they never turned up.
I can't remember what they paid me, but it would have been 30 some odd years ago, and I probably spent it by now.
Right. And what would your, I suppose that is your legacy, isn't it? But what would you like your legacy to be?
Well, that's the reason I wrote my book, is because there have been so many third-hand versions of these events that I took part in, and I always find them unsatisfying, because the only way these people can compile this is to interview a whole bunch of people who all had different viewpoints. And so I've written this as a first-person account of my own activities, and I don't have to argue with anyone else about what I did, and certainly I can point to someone and say, well, he did this because I saw him do it. Can't tell you why he did it. I'll tell you why I did what I did. Yeah. And so I wrote it as a first-person account. Really, there are only 4 people who took part in this at the same level that I did, and that would be myself, Gary Fisher, Joe Breeze, and Tom Richie. Mm-hmm. And of that group, I'm the only one who's going to sit down and write a book. Yeah. So I did. And of course, I've written for a lot of magazines. I can write. So I did.
Unlike me. That's fantastic. And what's Tom Richie up to? So you might know Richie Wheels and Richie Steel.
Richie USA is basically a big. He used to build the frames, and he can build. He just gave me a handmade frame that he'd made because he can still do that. But he is primarily a design guy, and if you all the American brands, the big American brands, if you look on the components, they'll either say Bontrager or Richie USA. Mm-hmm. So Tom is he's a design guy, but at this point the guy has so much money he just rides his bike.
Yeah, I bet. If he's just make sure
we're
that's
good.
Still, yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I bet, because if you're making the steel tubing for nearly every steel bike in the world, that's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Did you know that the American Patent Office had 2 towers, and one of them was entirely devoted to bicycle painting?
Right. That was in the 1890s when the original bike boom was taking place, and the safety bicycle, which came in around the middle of the 1880s, took over from what we now call a penny farthing. It was, until the safety bicycle existed, it was just a velocipede or a bicycle. But the United States Patent Office had two facilities, and the larger of the 2 was just for bicycle patents. And I'm looking at a bicycle and I'm thinking, how many things can you possibly patent on this thing? But clearly it was the third wave of precision manufacturing, and it started off in the first part of the 19th century. The military wanted rifles that would be interchangeable. So that was the first precision manufacturing. The middle of the 19th century, sewing machines came along, mm-hmm. and that required precision manufacturing. And then when the bicycle came along, that was the third really great need for precision manufacture. But around 1900, all that engineering talent moved over into automotive. Yeah. And so really bicycling pretty much died in the United States, other than track racing and a few transportation bicycles, but it went away. And in the 70s and 80s, when mountain biking erupted, it was really the biggest development in cycling of the 20th century, because up until then things had been incremental. Things had, road bikes had improved gradually over a period of 60 or 70 years, but nothing changed the direction of the bicycle industry like the mountain bike did. This is my book. It's called Fat Tire Flyer, Repack and the Birth of Mountain Biking, and it recounts all the adventures that I had with a number of my friends that led to this amazing sport that we all enjoy today.
So I don't know about America, but in the UK, lots of the roads were actually built based on the bicycle lobby. People were riding bikes everywhere, and they wanted the roads to be built for that reason. And then, of course, cars came along and sort of took over the roads to an extent. But we actually have quite good rights in the UK because most roads were there before cars. You can even go along the road with a wheelbarrow, if you like, and of course ride bicycles on them. How is it in the US? I know.
Well, in the 1890s, the League of American Wheelmen was instrumental in getting the roads paved and surfaced to the point where they were useful for bicycles. But of course, as we all know, the automobile came along and sucked up all the engineering talent and basically drove the bicyclists off the road where we are now. But anyway, but interestingly, the League of American Wheelmen conducted one of their annual rides in the 19-teens in automobiles. I mean, please, guys. But also, bicyclists were responsible for creating the first route guides because, of course, you couldn't go buy a road map, and such things did not exist. And the bicycle clubs would go out and they would basically ride up roads or whatever roads they found with little mile indicators so they could measure distances, and then they would compile these, and I have one from the 1880s, these vast indexes of where these roads went and how far you went to get to wherever, because like I say, there was no map of any kind, and if you wanted to go on a ride, you would consult one of these indexes and find out, okay, I'm going 5 miles to this junction, and then I'm going to turn left and go another 3 miles to somewhere else, and that was the only way that you could actually travel and know where you were going, because the roads were not marked, and so the bicycle clubs would just go out on rides, and they would take careful notes of the distances and like what they found.
Yeah, it's almost like a sort of 100-year-old, like on Google Maps, you've asked for a list of directions.
Right. Well, and it very, very similar, but of course you didn't get it on a computer. It came in. I have a book called 10,000 Miles on a Bicycle, and it basically identifies. Well, I don't know if it's 10,000 miles. I haven't read the whole thing, but it identifies by region where the roads go and how far you need to go to get anywhere and what towns you might encounter.
Yeah, that's awesome. I understand you actually went to, was it Hebden Bridge you cycled earlier this week?
Yes, I went to Hebden Bridge, where Single Track Magazine, of course, is based, and I did a ride there, and also I spoke at a pub. And but the ride was kind of interesting because they took me down a single track trail in the dark. I mean, we had lights, of course. But I'm thinking, how many 72-year-old guys are you going to take down a single track on a bicycle in the dark that he's never seen? So, but you
managed to do it, and they gave you a e-assist bike, I think, and you still enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, well I told them if I'm riding with people 40 and 50 years younger than I am, you have to get me something to assist, otherwise I won't be back in time to give the talk. So, yeah, and in fact, I don't have such a bike at home. I ride my regular mountain bike, but I ride with guys my age, and they don't leave me, miles behind. So I insisted that if you want me to ride with the locals on their trails, and they're that much younger than I am, well, you're going to have to get me a little help.
Yeah,
so I surrendered to modern technology.
So you think e-biking is generally a good thing? I mean, I like to think that when I'm older, with e-biking, I'll be able to ride, well into my older years.
Well, they're not actually legal on the trails that I ride my regular bike on. However, I could see that for just my local transportation. It doesn't have to be a mountain bike, just something that adds to your range, you know. And also, I see them now where they've stretched the bike out and gives you a lot of freight capacity to move goods and whatever. And right now, I'm limited to what I can throw in my backpack, but these stretched out bikes give you, and a bike stretched out gives the ability to move 100 pounds of whatever, and you know, you can get it home, so you can do a week's worth of shopping on one trip.
My friend Tony at Cycle Hoop has one of those, and they transport lots of stuff on it.
Right.
I think it's a really good thing because it can replace the car. Like, people generally use a car because they've got the boot space for their shopping.
Right.
If everyone had a bike like that, an e-bike like that, then you wouldn't need cars on the roads pretty much.
Well, it would certainly take a lot of them off the road, and I see, of course, I live in a place where cycling has a long tradition, and there's a dedicated part of the population that uses bicycles, but I quite often will see the mom with the two kids on the stretched out e-bike, and she's taking them to school or whatever, or wherever she takes them, but mom and the two kids are on the bike, and that's certainly one less car on the road. And what I like about that is that when you get to the grocery store, you don't have to park it on the far side of the lot.
Yeah,
you drive right up to the door, and it's a short walk.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we're trying to get that in the UK. In the Netherlands, they're very popular, but a few people have them here. But it's ironic, isn't it? There's too many cars. People say, "Oh, yeah, I shouldn't take a bicycle because it's dangerous." But if everyone had a bicycle, then who's riding it, then there wouldn't be many cars. It wouldn't be dangerous. So.
Well, then we'd just fall off them. But but I've done that a few times.
Yeah. Well, that was great, Charlie. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, and thank you, and thank you all you viewers that might want to check this out. Remember, two things: Fat Tire Flyer is the book. Mountain Bike Legacy Project is the rest of my life, essentially.
Excellent. And I couldn't let you leave without, of course, giving you this product, Green Oil, the world's greenest chain lube for bikes. Lasts over 200k on the chain, fully biodegradable, skin safe, and no PTFE. I wouldn't be running this business. I was inspired by mountain biking, actually riding through a river on a mountain bike ride, thinking, well, what about the oil going into the water? And so I couldn't let you leave without having
all right. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Charlie.
And that's a wrap.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sure. Hi, my name is Charlie Kelly. I've been mountain biking since before that word existed, and I would like you to check out this product, Green Oil. It's the greenest oil for your mountain bike, and it won't pollute the streams when you ride through them.